Ahmad Wa, Panyawe Roslam, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the Sabbath. Barakatha Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai Asherah Nathanawe Hashabaf Bashalawam the water Aman. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the Sabbath in peace. Thank you, so be it. The Alya Ma'ah Shariah Machad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayim Naimya O Harayim Mayan Yabua Isaiah Yabua Maya Hawa Shai Shab Shemayim Warataza La Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yela Yanawam Shashua Marka Hanab La Yanawam Wala Ishan Shashwamar Yashvele Yahweh Shemaria Yahweh Tazalia Ayo Yad Yim Yad Yawumam Hashemash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashemaria Makal Ra Yashamar Napasha Yahweh Yashamar Hawalakya Wabua Ayab Ma'aifa wa Aid Iwalam Basham Yahweh Shai Thawada Man. Psalms 121, a song of degrees. I have looked up mine eyes into the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Amen. Shema Yasharella, Hero Israel. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shema Yasharella, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Deuteronomy 6 and 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Amen. Fapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abinawa Shaba Shemayim Kodash Hayya Shamka Yahweh Malakwavka Taba'a Ratazawanka Hayya Aisha Barataza Kabashemayim Latalanawa Lakham Yawam Zad Wasalaklanawa Kabawat Nawa Kasalaknawa Kabawat Yanawa Wala Abiyarnawa, O Messiahwan, Nabo, Hawashinawa, Marai, Kaya, Laka, Hamalakwaf, Wa Allah, Wa Thaparath, Wa Walam, Maman. Matthew 6 and 9. After this manner, therefore, pray ye, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Ha'ai the Ten Commandments. La'ah, Yahaya, La'kab, Alahayim, Akarim, Alapanyat, La'ah, Tha'aishab, La'kab, Paso, Wala'ab, Tha'ibadam, La'ab, Balakwakaf, Shamwa, Yahweh, Alahayaka, Lashawab, Zakar, F, Hayawam, Hashabaf, Lakodashwa, Kabad, Abika, Wa Amaka, La'ab, Taratazak, La'ab, Thana'ab, La'ab, Taganab, La'ab, Tha'ainad, Shukur, La'ab, Thakamad, Ko, Asherab, Lara'ika, Aman. Exodus 20 and 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself to them nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. For the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Amen. Yeshabwa, please be seated. Barakatay Hawa by Shimi Hawashai, Sharanathan and Al Paria Kapan Tuara Aman. La Yahweh by Shimi Hawashai, Ab Yasha. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Amadwa Panyawa Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Barakatha Yahweh, Hagado, Rakawam, Abiyar, Wanawa Elyawan, Malak, Shao, Shamayam, Warataza, Wakal, Dabarium, Kayayam, Wagam, Hamashiach, Mayahawe, Arawanawe, Habnawe, Hapalev, Yahweh Aitiza, Yahweh Shai, Zakarnawe, Yahweh, Bartazawan, Ainka, Yasha'ala, Zarnawe, Bana, was up, Yasha'ala, Au, Nanawa, Yam Yam, Aitha, Kayawamyam, Makudam, Babakusha, Shalak, Mike Allah, Watazawadak, Alahayim, La, Maganawa, Raparnawa, Washamar, Ilnawa, Bakur, Shalak, Haruka, Shau, Yahweh, Lanawa, Lala Mudnawa, Rabiam, Kakama, Thabawana, Wada Aith, Shau, the Barka, Basham, Yahweh, the Wada, Thumgad, Waiwalam, Naman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you, right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natam Lanawa, Hatawarat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natam Lanawa, Awar, Lara Awath. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Baraka Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Nathan Lanawa, Karan, Hayo, Lakwara, Ha'aim. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Shai to us the olive oil to anoint Israel. Baraka Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Nathan Lanawa, Hasheman, Zayath, Lamashak, Yasha'ala, Yeshabra. Be seated. Okay, so Shalom Yasharala. So Shalom, everyone that's here in Philly. Shalom, everybody listening in on teleconference. And Shalom, everyone watching on live stream. Welcome to Ashal Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples, found throughout North, Central, South America, and the Caribbean, make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel, once lost, now found, and that we as a people have fallen to a lower state, politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God, found the Bible given to us by Moses, and that we come out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back to these commandments we broke, by following Jesus Christ. And one way we do that is by keeping the Sabbath holy, which is from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown every week. And as our particular branch of Christ does, we go through a Sabbath service regularly on the Sabbath day. And our reading today is going to be back in the Old Testament, picking up in 2 Samuel's chapter 13 and 14. Once again, 2 Samuel chapter 13 and 14, picking up where we left off last time from 2 Samuel's 11 and 12. So once again, just put that down for your notes. 2 Samuel's 13 and 14. It's going to be our reading for today. My name is Nabi Al-Zababal. I have the distinct privilege of going through the service with you guys today. And just write down for your notes that according to the Gregorian calendar, it would be April 8th, 2023. But then according to our calendar, it would be the first month and the 19th day. We can count that because we know in the week of the Passover, we're in the 5th day of the Passover, or I should say the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Passover beginning the Feast of Unleavened Bread. We know we kept it Monday, which would have been the 15th day when the sun went down. So counting from Monday to Friday night sundown, which is when the Sabbath began, that would have began the 19th day. So that's how we know we're in the first month and the 19th day today. All right. So let's get into it. Let's go to 2 Samuel's chapter 13. And just kind of as a recap, before I get into 2 Samuel 13, just remember what we're going to see going forward. These next couple chapters is going to be a response to David's transgression, as well as the Most High's judgment based on that transgression, as well as the Most High's mercy. We'll see kind of all those things manifested together as one, based on his decision to commit adultery with a married woman, namely Bathsheba, and also the killing of her husband by putting him in the front lines, Uriah the Hittite, who was one of his mighties, as we touched on last time. So as far as the judgment goes, when we go back to 2 Samuel chapter 12, I'm just going to read 7 to 14 real quick, just so we kind of get a recap, just so we kind of have a casting for the events going to be taking place in these next couple chapters. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 12. I'm going to start from verse 7. It reads, "And Nathan," remember he was one of David's prophets, right? "Said unto David, Thou art the man." The man he's talking about is the story he told earlier, that he related to David earlier, that David didn't know. He didn't know it was talking about him, but it was an allegory referring to his situation with Bathsheba and Uriah, who's recently deceased now. "Thou art the man, thus saith the Lord God of Israel," or Yahweh power of Israel, or in the Hebrew Yasha Allah. "I anointed thee king over Israel, and I delivered thee out of the hand of Saul. And I gave thee thy master's house and thy master's wives into thy bosom, and gave thee the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have moreover have given unto thee such and such things. Therefore hast thou despised the commandment of Yahweh to do evil in his sight. Thou hast killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword, and hast taken his wife to be thy wife, and hast slain him with the sword of the children of Ammon." Right? So just recapping what he had done. right? Committing adultery with a married woman by putting her husband in the front lines after seeing her bathing and being attracted to her. He's pretty much telling him, David, you have, wives, right? And I would have even given you more wives than what you currently have, as well as power and dominion. Well, why take this woman and kill this man that she was married to, right? It says, and the children of Ammon, who are the heathens who happen to be warned against at this time, which at the end of this chapter, it goes into us having the victory over them. Reading on, it says, now therefore the sword shall never depart from thine house, because thou hast despised me, and hast taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be thy wife. Thus saith Yahweh, behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house, and I will take thy wives before thine eyes, and give them unto thy neighbor, and he shall lie with thy wives in the sight of this sun, for thou didst it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. So the Most High is always a way, he always has a way of returning whatever you do. Like we talk about, you reap what you sow, we read that in the New Testament, but we see that's a continual idea when it comes to the Most High's judgment, right? What we do comes back to us. But the Most High said, change it a little bit where he says, you did this secretly, as far as taking his wife to be your own and then putting him to death by having him in the front lines. I'm going to have this calamity fall upon you now. As far as your neighbor taking your wives, I'm going to do it openly, right? Out in the open for all to see. It says in 13, and David said unto Nathan, I have sinned against Yahweh. And Nathan said unto David, the Lord also hath put away thy sin, thou shalt not die, right? So here's the mercy of the Most High, right? To where, like we talked about before in the previous classes in the Sabbath services, our words and deeds are weighed in the balance in the end throughout our lives, right? Because we come back every third or fourth generation, like we read in the Ten Commandments, right? So in this life, what Nathan is telling him on the Most High's behalf is that you should not die because of a sin normally like this, you will be put to death. But he's saying that what? You're not going to die, right? Because of the good that he's done. It says in 14, howbeit, because by this deed thou hast given great occasion to the enemies of Yahweh to blaspheme, the child also that is born unto thee shall surely die, right? So this child that's going to be between you and Bathsheba, right? Because she conceived when they committed adultery. He said that the child's going to die. And when we go back a couple of weeks, we'll go into what happened after that. But I just want to read that judgment. Just as we go forward, we can kind of see how the Most High will carry this forward. So it can kind of be a learning lesson for us now and just something for us to reflect on when it comes to considering our own lives and our own sin and our own shortcoming and being considerate of the Most High's mercy and how he decides to dispense it. Always remembering that what? Our deeds are weighed in the balance, whether it be our words or our deeds, which is pretty much our decisions in communication. I'll read this real quick before we get started too. It speaks to this. This is in Ecclesiasticus. Ecclesiasticus. Chapter 21 and verse 25. Once again, Ecclesiasticus, chapter 21 and verse 25. It reads, the lips of talkers will be telling such things as pertaineth not unto them, but the words of such that have understanding are weighed in the balance. So when it comes to words and deeds, especially here, words, it says, the lips of talkers will be telling such things as pertaineth not unto them. So you're pretty much a talebearer, talking about other people's business, right? Like they say now, gossiping. But it says the words of such that understanding are weighed in the balance. So a person that understands when it comes to their words, they're going to weigh them in the balance, meaning they're going to think about what they say before they say it, right? It's the same thing when it comes to our decisions, right? We're going to think about things and consider all the different possibilities, right? When it comes to small matters or great matters. Small matters, considering right versus wrong, when it's usually really clear. Whereas great answers or great matters, you're not so much considering right and wrong, you're considering more so uh, what's the best way to go, right? So you have choosing the right answer versus choosing the best answer. Choosing the right answer when it comes to small matters, right and wrong, choosing the best answer when it comes to greater or more heavier matters, right? Where there might be more than one option that could work. So it becomes a matter of choosing the best option. Okay. So now 2 Samuel chapter 13 and verse 1, and it reads, and it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Right? So now, when we read, to go with 13 and 1, when we go back to 2 Samuel chapter 3, it gives us the children of David, right? So we know who these characters are. We're going to get to know them a little more intimately as we go through these next couple chapters. But we go back to 2 Samuel 3. You can read 1 down to 5. Also, you can write down 1 Chronicles. 1 Chronicles chapter 3. Oops. 1 Chronicles chapter 3. 1 down to 9. We get the children of David. So this is 2 Samuel 3. I'm going to start from 1, and I'll read down to 5. It says, now there was long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, but David waxed stronger and stronger, and the house of Saul waxed weaker and weaker. So we read this already in previous Sabbaths. But then we also read this in verse 2. And unto David were sons born in Hebron, and his firstborn was Amnon. So this is the same Amnon we read about now in 2 Samuel 13, as his children have come of age. It says, of Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. So that was one of his wives, Ahinoam. Verse 3, and his second, Chaleb of Abigail, the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. Right? We read her story, right? A couple Sabbaths back, going into Nabal. Then it says, and the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. So remember this place, Geshur. This is important as we read today. And this Absalom, he's an important figure as well that we're going to read about today. And number 4, or verse 4, and the fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. Remember him too, but we're going to read about him more so. We're going to read about him more detail later on in 2 Samuel's, also going into 1 Kings. We're going to get to read about a situation pertaining to him as well. That'll come later on in the history of the Samuels, going towards the Kings, 1 Kings. It says, in the fifth, Shephatiah, the son of Abital. Then it says, and the sixth, Ithream by Eglah, David's wife. These were born to David in Hebron. So here we have the list of his children that were born in Hebron. We go to 1 Chronicles chapter 3. We get those same figures, but then also here it talks about other children that he had that were born in Jerusalem. Because remember, when you read about David's reign, as we're going to read, as we read before, as we're going to read again, when David first took rule, he ruled in Hebron, which was in Judah, for 7.5 years, during the time when he had conflict with the house of Saul that remained even after Saul's death. And then he became ruler over all Jerusalem after that 7.5 year period. And then in Jerusalem, which was the capital city of all Israel, he reigned there for 33 years. So his rule was broke up into 40 years altogether, 7.5 years in Hebron, but then 33 years in Jerusalem. But this is in First Chronicles chapter 3 and 1. It's going to be similar to what we read in Second Samuel. It says, now these were the sons of David, which were born unto him in Hebron. The firstborn, Amnon of Ahinoam, the Jezreelitess, who we read about already. The second, Daniel of Abigail, the Carmelitess. This is the same as Chileab. It's just here it mentions Daniel, so it's probably a surname that he had. It says, the third, Absalom, the son of Maacah, the daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur. So you read about him already. The fourth, Adonijah, the son of Haggith. The fifth, Shephatiah of Abital. The sixth, Ithream, by Eglah, his wife. These six were born unto him in Hebron, and there he reigned 7 years and 6 months, like we discussed. And in Jerusalem he reigned 30 and 3 years. Then it says in verse 5, and these were born unto him in Jerusalem, Shemaiah and Shobab and Nathan and Solomon, four of Bathshua, the daughter of Amiel. Now this Nathan and Solomon, Nathan's going to be one of his sons as well, not to be confused with Nathan as prophet. But this is Solomon, who we know who will become the king after him, who we'll get into more details with him when we get into Kings, right? It says of Bathshua, the daughter of Amiel. This is the same as Bathsheba. It's just spelled a little different here. But that's referring to that same figure. So she was the mother of these four. It says Ibhar also, and Elishama, and Eliphalet, and Noga, and Nepheg, and Japhia, and Elishama, and Eliada, and Eliphalet, 9. These were all the sons of David, besides the sons of the concubines, and Tamar, their sister. So this Tamar, their sister, she's important. We're going to read about her too. She's going to be an important figure in the chapters we're going to read today. So there's a little chronicles for just, the who's who we're reading about. But as we go on, we're going to see what happens now. So let's go back to 2 Samuel 13. So 2 Samuel chapter 13. I'll start from verse 1 again. It says, and it came to pass after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a fair sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her, right? So now, when you go into the law, right, it talks about what? You're not supposed to see the nakedness of your near kin, right? As they come of age, right? When your infants and toddlers, of course, you're going to wash them and stuff. But when they come of age, right, that's the thing. You're not supposed to see someone's naked. You're supposed to cover up when you're at home, when you're around siblings as well as family members. And this even leads into adulthood as well, where you're not supposed to see their nakedness and anything else that will come after that, which is, we're going to read about here, or today we might refer to as incest, right? So that's what's going on here. In verse 2, it says, and Amnon was so vexed that he felt sick for his sister Tamar, for she was a virgin, and Amnon thought it hard for him to do anything to her, right? So because they knew the law as far as you can't be with your own family, right? Your immediate family members. But he felt sick for his sister, right? So he really caught a bad Jones for his sister Tamar, right? And it says she was fair, so, this making it even harder for him to resist, right? And when you go into this law, as far as him taking it hard, we go into the laws of nakedness. It talks about not being or not seeing the nakedness of your near kin, right? This even goes back to Noah, where we read that story back in Genesis, where Noah had a couple drinks too many after planting a vineyard, and his son Ham saw his nakedness and then laughed and mocked. But then his brothers went backwards with a sheet and covered their father up, right, who was exposed in his tent. So we see that law being understood even back then. But this is the law that speaks on it. This is Leviticus chapter 18. Leviticus chapter 18 and verse 9, where it reads, "The nakedness of thy sister, the daughter of thy father, or daughter of thy mother, whether she be born at home or born abroad, even their nakedness thou shalt not uncover." You see? So look at what it says. Not only the daughter of thy father, but also the daughter of thy mother. So you guys could be of a different, have a different fathers, be of a different tribe even, right? Depending on the tribe of that father, right? If the woman remarries. But it still says, regardless, whether it's the same father or the same mother, that's still considered your near kin. You're supposed to uncover their nakedness. This is also repeated in Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 17. Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 17, which reads, "And if a man shall take his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and see her nakedness, and she see his nakedness, it is a wicked thing, and they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. He have uncovered his sister's nakedness. He shall bear his iniquity." See that? And then we had this also echoed by the prophet Ezekiel. I'll get this one too. This is whole 2 Samuel 13. This is Ezekiel chapter 22. In verse 11. Ezekiel 22 and 11, where he's speaking against Jerusalem during his time, which he was a prophet during the time of the Babylonian captivity, right? But he speaks up against Israel as far as the judgment that they have to face for their wickedness. It says in chapter 22 and verse 11 of Ezekiel, "And one hath committed abomination with his neighbor's wife, and another hath lewdly defiled his daughter-in-law, and another in thee hath humbled his sister, his father's daughter." You see, as you read above and below in this chapter, you'll see all the different atrocities Israel was committing. And because of that, the judgment they had to face. You go into that history that Ezekiel was talking about, that uh, Israel had to go through because of their choices as a people, which was us. We're just back now, right? Because we come back in our family lines. We just don't remember who we were back then. So now in 2 Samuel 13, now I'm going to read on in verse 3. 2 Samuel 13 and 3, it says, "But Amnon," remember he was David's eldest, "had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother." It says, and Jonadab was a very subtle man, right? So this was his cousin, right? Because it says that it was the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. Remember, David was the youngest of his brothers. So this man he was friends with was actually his cousin, right? Because he was his father's brother's son. But it says he was subtle. It says in verse 4, "And he said unto him, Why art thou being the king's son lean from day to day?" Right? So it was like he was so sick for his sister. It was like he wasn't even, I guess, eating the way he was supposed to, right? "Wilt thou not tell me?" And Amnon said unto him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." You see? So now they're all siblings, but he says Absalom's because when you go into it, Tamar and Absalom had the same mother, right? That's why he says Absalom's sister. So they were both children that he had with this daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur, they read about earlier. We read in 2 Samuel 3 and 1 Chronicles 3. It says in verse 5, "And Jonadab said unto him, Lay thee down on thy bed, and make thyself sick. And when thy father cometh to see thee, say unto him, I pray thee, let my sister Tamar come, and give me meat, and dress the meat in my sight, that I may see it, and eat it at her hand." So now we see why he's referred to as a subtle man, right? So this is counsel Amnon's cousin's giving him, but it's not so wise counsel, right? Because all it's going to do is just tempt him even further, right? To lay down and be sick and pretend to be sick, to make it seem like it's one thing when really it's something else, right? And that he's not being sincere. Reading on in verse 6, it says, so Amnon laid down and made himself sick, right? And when the king was come to see him, Amnon said unto the king, I pray thee, let tomorrow my sister come and make me a couple of cakes in my sight, that I may eat at her hand. So he's going forward with the plan, the scheme that Jonadab gave him as far as an idea, right? So he can get closer to his own sister, who he desires the way he shouldn't. Then David sent home to Tamar, saying, go now to thy brother Amnon's house and dress him meat. Because remember, David is not privy to, the whole scheme. He just thinks it's just a situation, right? That could happen, at any time, right? And we've all probably experienced that, where we have family members and we just tend to our siblings, right? That may be ill, or even parents, right? That's not being a strange thing at all. But we know, based on what we read, what Amnon and Jonadab, what they know. It says, so Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was laid down. And she took flour and kneaded it, and made cakes in his sight, and did bake the cakes, right? So don't be tempted. I know we're doing a feast of unleavened bread, right? I know we're probably in the 5th day, we're saying, oh man, all this unleavened bread, all these matzos, right? I want some regular cakes, some regular pastries. Hold fast now. Remember, we're still supposed to be thinking about how we left Egypt in haste. We didn't have time for the baking bread and for the bread to rise due to yeast. Let's read on in this story, though, and we'll see what happens. It says in verse 9, and she took a pan and poured them out before him, but he refused to eat. And Amnon said, have out all men from me. And they went out, every man from him. Oh, goodness. So what's going to happen now? Verse 10, and Amnon said unto Tamar, bring the meat into the chamber, that I may eat of thine hand. And Tamar took the cakes which she had made and brought them into the chamber to Amnon, her brother, right? So remember, she has no idea what's going on. She's just tending to her brother who's sick, as her father asked her. And remember, when we see meat in the scriptures, right? When we look at the Hebrew word, it's more loosely just translated into food. So I know sometimes we have different debates about when it says in Genesis about on the 3rd day, the Most High made different types of trees and plants, and it says that he made the things that grew on them for meat. So people will read that and go, see, that's why we shouldn't be eating any flesh of any animals, right? Because it says these should be for meat. But no, it was just saying that these things are lawful to eat, but it didn't exclude clean animals, right, for eating as well. That's why we say just look at the diet of the priests, and we'll see all the things there that we can eat. Just the dietary law for everybody, of course, but you could use the priest as a measuring stick to go, okay, if it was lawful for them, then it should be lawful for us. It's just a matter of the wicked having rule and them corrupting, the plants and animals, to where now any of them can make you sick. But now, if you only want to eat, vegetables, then let that be your prerogative. It doesn't mean that, clean meats are awful, wicked. But you'll have certain people that'll push that out there and say, God said, when it's not what God said. But, it's just another discussion. So you see this bread being referred to meat, that's just the understanding. The Hebrew word more loosely translates into food. So reading on, it says in verse 11, and when she had brought them unto him to eat, he took hold of her and said unto her, come lie with me, my sister, right? So he's now forcing himself or asking her to lie with him, and she's his sister. It says in verse 12, and she answered him, nay, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing ought to be done in Israel. Do not thou this folly, right? So she's resisting him, saying, this is crazy. Why would we do this? This is against the law. This is folly or foolishness, right? You shouldn't do this. 13, and I, whither shall I cause my shame to go? Right? Because remember, we read earlier she was a virgin, right? And as for thee, thou shalt be as one of the fools in Israel. Now, therefore, I pray thee, speak unto the king, for he will not withhold me from thee. Right? So she's like, take it up with the king, referring to, their father, because he's a ruler, right? About, wanting to take a wife and everything else, but don't do this with me because I'm your sister, right? And we know this is fooling or folly in Israel, right? It's an unlawful thing, right? It's going to cause me shame, and you'll be, a fool being the son of a king doing something like this. It says in verse 14, howbeit he would not hearken unto her voice, but being stronger than she, forced her and lay with her. So he forced her against her will anyway, even at the resisting, and even trying to talk reason to him. So once again, like we were saying earlier, that's why I started off with what we read a couple weeks ago about the Most High. Even though he has mercy, we want to always be mindful of what we do, because it can trickle down not only on our part, but then it can affect those that come after us, right? Our children and our children's children going forward. And as we're going to read throughout these chapters in Samuel, this is the beginning of other calamities where you're going to have one situation like this that's horrible lead to another situation, right? Between his children. So reading on to verse 15. And Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred wherewith he hated her was greater than the love wherewith he had loved her. And Amnon said unto her, arise, be gone. So after he did this act, it's like his love pretty much did a light switch, just went from on to off, turned from love to hate. Now he's telling her to be gone, right? And she said unto him, there is no cause. This evil in sending me away is greater than the other that thou didst unto me. But he would not hearken unto her. So it's like a two-time deal, right? To where not only did you force me, right, against my will, not only is that wicked to do for any woman of Israel, let alone your own sister, but now you just send me away, right? Like you want to have nothing to do with me and you had total hatred towards me. What's the cause? It says, be not hearken unto her. It says in 17, then he called his servant that ministered unto him and said, put now this woman out from me and bolt the door after her, right? So now he's having his servant put her out, and he's saying to pretty much bolt or lock the door after her. It says, and she had a garment of diverse colors upon her, for with such robes were the king's daughters that were virgins apparel. Then his servant brought her out and bolted the door after her, right? So they had a certain garment that they wore that was, like I said, a certain pattern or a certain style of dress for young girls that hadn't been married yet, right? So she had this on because, before, she was a virgin before her own brother forced her, right? It says, and Tamar put ashes on her head and rent her garment of diverse colors that was on her and laid her hand on her head and went on crying. So this is a horrible thing. So I know we read the law about not uncovering the nakedness of your sister, but as far as forcing a woman, you want to get this law real quick to go with that, because the Bible deals with that too. Let me get this real quick in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 22. Deuteronomy 22. And I'll start from 25 to go what we just read. Deuteronomy 22 and verse 25, it reads, but if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and the man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her, oh, you know what? Let me start above in verse 23. So verse 23, it says, if a damsel that is a virgin be betrothed to an husband, and a man find her in the city, and lie with her, then ye shall bring them both out unto the gate of that city, and ye shall stone them with stones, that they die. The damsel, because she cried not, being in the city, and the man, because he had humbled his neighbor's wife. So thou shalt put away evil from among you. Right? So 23, 24 deals with the act of being done in the city, going into how what you have more people that are in the city, meaning what? More chances for there being a witness, right? I think we even see now when you're in an urban area and, whether it be, in real life or even like pop culture, you'll see people doing certain things in the city, whether it be selling drugs or doing different things. And look around, you'll see somebody looking from a window or from around the corner. And sometimes they'll try to pretend like they didn't see. And they'll say, oh, get that person. They saw what we did. Chase them down, right? And you'll even hear this too for women that are training when it comes to self-defense. If a man were ever to come after them in this manner, you'll hear them say, or they'll talk about, you know, is ironic as it is, they'll say yell fire as opposed to rape, right? The man is trying to force himself on you, and you're in the city walking. They say people are more responsive to fire than they are to rape. As sad as that is, that's that's life in Babylon, right? But it says now in verse 15. Oh, wait a minute, I jumped back. Wrong side. Now I'm in 25 rather. So I read 23 and 24 of Deuteronomy 22. Now I'm in verse 25. It says, but if a man find a betrothed damsel in the field, and a man force her and lie with her, then the man only that lay with her shall die. But unto the damsel thou shalt do nothing. There is in the damsel no sin worthy of death. For as when a man rises against his neighbor and slayeth him, even so is this matter. For he found her in the field, and the betrothed damsel cried, and there was none to save her. You see? So when you're out in the field, there's not as many people out there. So it's hard to be heard if you're crying for help. Whereas opposed in the city, you're going to have witnesses, and then people, if they're in their right frame of mind, they're going to what? Run to the occasion to try to stop it from happening, right? So depending on how Israel was, whether it was a time in Israel we were doing the right thing versus the wrong thing, this law was either kept or not kept. But the law speaks on this. Like I said, as we're reading in 2 Samuel 13, it's a couple things going on at once. It's like transgressions combined with each other. But now back in 2 Samuel 13, now I'm in verse 20. And Absalom, her brother, said unto her, hath Amnon thy brother been with thee? But hold now thy peace, my sister. He is thy brother. Regard not this thing. So Tamar remained desolate in her brother Absalom's house, right? So Absalom, who they share the same father, David, but also the same mother as well, right? He just told her to keep her peace and to regard not this thing, right? And then just said, you know what, for now, just stay with me, stay at my house, right? For for the time going forward, given the situation and the shame that she'd been put through by being forced by her own brother, right? Because it's going to be, like I said, like she said earlier, it's like a stain on her name, a stain on her honor, right? A shame unto her, to where any man she might have been looking to now may look at her a different way, or say, oh man, I want to be with her, but she's already been taken, and by her own brother at that. But now what's Absalom going to do now because of this? Let's read on and see. Verse 21. But when King David heard of these things, he was very wroth, right? So obviously you hear about these things that your kids do between each other. It's going to make you mad. And King David notwithstanding. It says, and Absalom spake unto his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar, right? So Absalom didn't make a move. But it says he hated his brother, which means what? As we're going to see, he's got something cooking up, right? He's plotting a response to what he did to his sister Tamar, really their sister Tamar, right? They just referred to him as brother and sister because they had the same father and mother. But now let's see what Absalom's going to do in response. And it's crazy because you see this act more and more when you're looking at like books, movies, music. You'll see this in like pop culture. This whole concept of incest being, suggested and even pushed to where it's almost like Esau's trying to normalize this thing. And you go back to Esau during the time of the Romans and the Greeks before them. They were practitioners of this, and we see evidence of that in the scriptures. You also see, evidence of that in just history. But Israel, unfortunately, we did this wickedness too, and yet other nations do it as well. But you see, our brother Esau pushed it especially in the different, like I said, books, movies, and music that you see now. You hear this concept of, incest of different kinds. In this case, brother and sister. You'll see it in different like TV shows and things like that. But yeah, that's the thing about the scriptures, right? The good, the bad, the ugly, it's all there. The right that we did and the wrong, and the Most High's judgment. And you see the judgment upon the other nations too that they had to face. So now, reading on. Hold on 1 second, Israel. Just give me 1 second. I just need to check on something. Okay, we're back, Israel. So now, let's continue on in verse 23. So it says in verse 23, and it came to pass after two full years that Absalom had sheep shears in Baal Hazor, which is beside Ephraim. And Absalom invited all the king's sons. So you had 2 whole years go by, right? After this situation took place, right? And it says that Absalom invited all the king's sons to a sheep shearing in Baal Hazor, right? So there was a certain time in the year when they would take their sheep if they had them and shear them, right? To where, they would grow like a full thing of wool they could just shave off and use for fabrics and things like that. So it was like I guess a big event that they would have. They would have like a get together and cut off the wool and sell on the market and do whatever they're going to do with it. Weave it, dye it, what have you. Because Absalom invited all the king's sons, so it's going to include Amnon, right, who's David's eldest. It says in verse 24, and Absalom came with the king and said, behold, now thy servant have sheep shears. Let the king, I beseech thee, and his servants go with thy servant. And the king said unto Absalom, nay, my son, let us not all now go, lest we be chargeable unto thee. And he pressed him, howbeit he would not go, but blessed him. Right? So he said, no, it's fine. I bless thee. Go ahead and enjoy, but without my company. Right? Then said Absalom, if not, I pray, let my brother Amnon go with us. And the king said unto him, why should he go with thee? But Absalom pressed him that he let Amnon and all the king's sons go with him. Right? So some time has gone by, but now what's Absalom thinking about? Right? What's Absalom cooking up? Right? And first he invited his dad, but now he's inviting Amnon. Right? Remember, there's what we do and there's why we do it, right? What's the cause? Let's read on and see. Now Absalom had commanded his servants, saying, Mark ye now when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say unto him, Smite Amnon, then kill him. Fear not, have I not commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. So here's what he plans to do, right? So he's taking his time. I know it's been about 2 years' time, but he hasn't forgotten what he's done to Tamar, right? Now, for her sake, he's going to get revenge and have his servants kill him. And he gives him the signal as far as when to do it, when he's married with wine, right? So like we said, one bad choice leads to another bad choice, right? And it's going to be other things are going to happen too as you go on in 2 Samuel, as you read on. And the servants of Absalom did unto Amnon as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's son arose, and every man get him upon his mule and fled, right? So after the situation went down, the other sons of David went their different ways after the situation went down where he had his servants fall upon Amnon, the eldest of David's sons. It says in verse 30, and it came to pass while they were in the way that tidings came to David, saying, Absalom hath slain all the king's sons, and there is not one of them left. Right? So it says here that he has slain all the sons. So is that exactly what happened? I don't know if that's what we read, but that's what they told David, right? That's what these tidings were that came to David. So that was actually, as we're going to see, an exaggeration. But just imagine hearing that news if you had, so many children and you hear that all of them have died. Kind of makes you think about Job and his children, right? And what befell them. It says, verse 31, then the king arose and tore his garments and lay on the earth, and all his servants stood by with their clothes rent. And Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, answered and said, Let not my lord suppose that they have slain all the young men, the king's sons. For Amnon only is dead. For by the appointment of Absalom, this have been determined from the day that he forced his sister Tamar. So here's Jonadab returning on the scene, right? The one who, helped Amnon along with his temptation, right? Set up the situation with him playing sick. Now he's going to be the one to tell David the actual news, and also not only what Absalom did, but also why, right? So this Jonadab was a subtle one, right? So once again, he returns to in this situation to tell his uncle King David what actually happened. They all aren't dead, but it's simply Amnon being dead because of what he did to Tamar, Absalom's sister, his daughter. 33. Now therefore let not my lord the king take the thing to his heart, to think that all the king's sons are dead, for Amnon only is dead. But Absalom fled, and the young men that kept the watch lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there came much people by the way of the hillside behind him. And Jonadab said unto the king, Behold, the king's sons come, as thy servant said, so it is. And it came to pass, as soon as he had made an end of speaking, that behold, the king's sons came and lifted up their voice and wept. And the king also and all his servants wept very sore. So it was relieved, at least not all his sons are dead, but now we see that Amnon, his son, was dead, right? So, yeah, once again, another tough situation. But now this is also reminiscent of another law they read about, which is somewhat evoked here, but we know it's not something that I guess the why, when we go into this law about the fleeing for succor to a city of refuge, that law is more so when you read it in the context, supposed to be applied to killing someone by accident, we know this is presumptuous. This is something that was intended by Absalom against Amnon for him forcing his sister Tamar. So it's actually something that was premeditated, but at the same time, we see the cause for it. So, like I said, it's a sticky situation. But you read in the law, it talks about this when you kill someone due to murder, which is premeditated. Also, when you do it when it's just manslaughter, which is you kill someone, but it's not murderous intent. So the law speaks on both scenarios. But in situations, we have to combine laws and weigh laws in the balance to know the best course of action to handle situations. But the law that speaks on that as far as going to flee after you kill someone. This is Exodus 21. Exodus 21. I'm going to start from 12. And I'll read down to 14. So this is Exodus 21 and 13. It reads, verse 12. He that smiteth a man so that he die, he shall surely be put to death. Right? So that's a judgment, hence them fleeing. Because regardless of the cause, a murder is done, right? The killing is done. 13, and if a man lie not in wait, but God deliver him into his hand, then will I appoint thee a place whither he shall flee. You see, this is going into manslaughter, where when it says God deliver him into his hand, it means you killed him, but it wasn't intentional, right? Due to an accident or you handling something. You read in other places, it talks about an example. This would be like an accident on a work site. You're doing some kind of work, whether it be like construction or carpentry. You got an axe, you're cutting a tree down, and you pull the axe out of a tree, and the axe head may slide off the handle, and it hit your neighbor who might be close by. That wasn't you trying to kill your neighbor, but it just happened by accident. But whoever you killed by that accident, you're gonna have family and friends that are near kin or close to that person that's gonna want revenge. So the law has a situation. When that situation happens, the law has what you could do, which is go to a city of refuge to flee. That's what it talks about here when it says, I will appoint thee a place where he shall flee. Then it says in 14, but if a man come presumptuously upon his neighbor to slay him with guile, it says, thou shalt take him from mine altar that he may die. So that's deal with another law as far as when you put your hands on the altar of burnt offering. It says, anything that toucheth it shall be holy. So I always use the example of you guys were ever young and you did like, you played jailbreak or freeze or what have you. When you chase someone, you might have a certain thing you might use as jail. It might be a tree or some kind of mailbox or something. You might have that as jail. But then the person who's not who's kind of like the robber, if you will, it's on the run. If a cop is catching people that are hiding and putting them in jail, a person can run to the tree or to the mailbox and say jailbreak, and then everyone will run away, and then you had to go and find them again, right? So I just think about that game. I think about this law where that's like a place you could touch. That's kind of like a zone for protection or for safety, but kind of in reverse. So that's Exodus 21:12 down to 14. But then also we see this law being described in more detail in Numbers chapter 35. Numbers 35. I'll start from verse 9. It goes all the way to the end. I'm not going to read all the way to the end. I'm just going to read the first couple of verses. just for time's sake, we'll get back to the story. But just write down your notes. Numbers 35, 9. It goes all the way down to the end, which is 34. It deals with the cities of refuge. So Numbers 35 and verse 9. It reads, "And the Lord, or Yahweh, spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye become over Jordan into the land of Canaan, then ye shall appoint you cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the slayer may flee thither, that killeth any person at unawares." Right? Like I said, we can read down, but do it on your own time. But when you read the rest of this chapter, it goes to the full detail behind what happens here and why you would do it. So it's sentiment is somewhat echoed here as far as Absalom fleeing away after killing his brother Amnon, even though we know it wasn't unawares. We know there was a cause, and we see that Amnon and Absalom's cousin Jonadab revealed to King David why it actually happened. And I'll read verse 12 as well, and I'll go back. It says, "And they shall be unto you cities for refuge from the avenger, that the manslayer die not until he stand before the congregation in judgment." Right? When you read down, their avenger is pretty much the person, family or friend that wants to avenge their blood that you killed, even though it was by accident. The manslayer is a person who killed the person by accident. So go back to 2 Samuel 13. Got a couple of verses here before we go to verse 14. So 2 Samuel 13 and 37, it reads, "But Absalom fled and went to Talmai, the son of Ammihud, king of Geshur, and David mourned for his son every day." Right? So he fled back to his father-in-law, who is this Talmai. This was his we could say, I'm sorry, his grandfather-in-law, you could say. This being his mother's father. It says, "And David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years." It says, "And the soul of King David longed to go forth unto Absalom, for he was comforted concerning Amnon, seeing he was dead." So here's a situation, right? Him knowing that Amnon, even though he was his eldest son, but because of what he did, it says he was comforted that he was killed. But why David didn't judge him himself, why Absalom did it, it's a tough situation. It's tough to say why he didn't do that. But we see Absalom, after 2 years' time, took matters to his own hands. But now he's fled into Geshur, like I said, the place where his mother's family comes from. And you go into the lineage, his lineage. But it says that he was there for 3 years' time. So he's kind of been MIA, so to speak. Somewhat reminiscent of Moses, right? Killing the Egyptian man, right? Who was abusing his brother. And then his brother saw him another day later and said, "Who are you that judges between us?" Right? When he saw them fight and he tried to break it up. You're going to kill us, so you killed that Egyptian man? And that's when Moses said, "Oh, this thing must be known." So then he went and fled and went to Midian, because he was worried about, facing judgment at the hands of the Egyptians. So fleeing after killing someone is not a rare thing we read the scriptures. It's just the situations that lead up to it can vary, as we see here, compared to what happened in Moses' case. So reading on in chapter 14, in verse 1, It reads, Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom.
Cha.
So Joab, who's, remember, David's captain of the host, his top general, this is the son of Zeruiah, just like he had two brothers who were very strong and thorough combatants, right? Remember, there was three of them. You had the youngest, Asahel, who's now dead at the hand of Abner, who was Saul's captain of the host. But you had the middle one, which was Abishai. He's still alive. So Joab is the eldest of these three. You'll hear them referred to as the sons of Zeruiah in plural, which, as we go on, we'll see that play out as far as David making certain mentions of them, saying, you sons of Zeruiah be too hard for me, right? Because they were thorough warriors, but that's at the same time, even though they were thorough combatants, when it came to more civil matters, they tended to act more like they were in times of war, and that ended up becoming a stain, if you will, at least for Joab, anyway. But we'll see that as we go on. So it says in 2 Samuel 14:1, Now Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom, and Joab sent to Tekoa and fetched thence a wise woman and said unto her, I pray thee, feign thyself to be a mourner, and put on now mourning apparel, and anoint not thyself with oil, but be as a woman that had a long time mourned for the dead. Right? So we see this clever way that they will communicate sometimes with each other by doing like a performance or an act, if you will, or sometimes even telling a story. Like we saw with Nathan giving David a story, a parable, who he thought was about someone else, but then once he realized it was about him, it was like a way for Nathan to kind of break the news to him, even though he was going to do it anyway, but I guess break it in a way where it would be more easily received, right? To where we saw how David was humbled by it, and he said, "You know what? I have sinned before the Lord." He didn't raise up against Nathan, who delivered him sound judgment from the Most High. Whereas we have other kings, when being told by their prophets what they needed to hear as opposed to what they want to hear, it can result in that king, if that king is lifted up, put them to death. How dare you deliver such news to me and say God's going to do this to me? Even if it was wrong, how dare you say that to your king and then go and try to put them to death or banish them or lock them away, right? So you'll see this as we go throughout the Kings and Chronicles, in this way of communicating either through performance, through performance acts, if you will, performance art, or through relating of a parable. So that's what Joab's doing here to convey this, what he wants her to convey to David concerning Absalom and him being pretty much almost like he's in a witness protection program where he's kind of far away and not coming back into the land of Israel. It says, but he is, verse 3, but come to the king and speak on this manner unto him. So Joab put the words in her mouth, right? And when the woman of Tekoa spake to the king, she fell on her face to the ground and did obeisance and said, Help, O king. And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? She answered, I am indeed a widow, woman, and my husband is dead. And thy handmaid had two sons, and they two strove together in the field. And there was none to part them, but the one smote the other and slew him. So now we're getting the story that Joab is telling her as far as, okay, I'm telling you how to come to him, but then here's a story I want you to relate to him, given your situation while you're mourning, and here's the story I want you to relate to the king. So she's saying that she had two sons that fought, and then one slew the other. And behold, the whole family is risen against thine handmaid, and they said, Deliver him that smote his brother, that we may kill him for the life of his brother whom he slew, and we will destroy the heir also. And so they shall quench my coal which is left, and shall not leave to my husband neither name nor remainder upon the earth. Right. So see the story she's telling David here, right? She's got the two sons, one through the other, but now she's saying, man, if I take heed what they say, not only will the one who killed my son be gone, but I'll lose my other son as well. He'll be put to death for murdering his brother. And now my husband, his two heirs will be gone, right? So no one else will be able to inherit his inheritance after I die, being the widow. So we see the scenario is somewhat similar, not exactly the same, but similar to what befell the sons of David, namely between Amnon and Absalom. Now he's got plenty of other sons, yes, but I'm sure no one wants to lose any children, even if they have a whole bunch of children. Just losing one can be heartbreaking, right? Look at Jacob, right? When he lost Joseph, not knowing what befell him, thinking that he was dead for so many years, right? It says, and the king said unto the woman, go to thine house, and I will give charge concerning thee. And the woman of Tekoa said unto the king, my lord, O king, the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless. And the king said, whosoever said aught unto thee, bring him to me, and he shall not touch thee any more. Then she said, or then said she, then said she, say that 7 times fast. I pray thee, let the king remember the Lord or Yahweh power, that thou wouldest not suffer the revengers of blood to destroy any more. That's what I was reading about earlier in Numbers 35, as well as Exodus 21. That's the law behind the revengers of blood, as far as the whoever the manslayer is or murderer in the case of Absalom, that the revengers of blood will come after them. It says that thou wouldest not suffer the revengers of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son. He said, as Yahweh liveth, there shall not one hair of thy son fall to the earth. Then the woman said, let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak one word unto my lord the king. And he said, say on. And the woman said, wherefore then hast thou thought such a thing against the people of God? For the king doth speak this thing as one which is faulty, and that the king doth not fetch home again his banished. For we must needs die, and are as water spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Neither doth God respect any person, yet doth he devise means that his banished be not expelled from him. Now therefore that I am come to speak, now therefore that I am come to speak of this thing unto my lord the king, is because the people have made it is because the people have made me afraid. And thy handmaid said, I will now speak unto the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his handmaid. For the king will hear to deliver his handmaid out of the hand of the man that would destroy me and my son together out of the inheritance of God. Then thine handmaid said, the word of my lord, the king, shall now be comfortable, for as an angel of God, so is my lord the king, to discern good and bad. Therefore, the Lord thy God, or how thy power will be with thee. Then the king answered and said unto the woman, hide not from me, I pray thee, the thing that I shall ask thee. And the woman said, let my lord the king now speak. So, as we're going to see, David's kind of putting together what she's saying, her situation that she's revealing to him, and also her kind of being privy to his situation, right? As we see in these last couple of verses. But now, as we're going to read the next verse, we're going to see what David's thinking now, if he's going to put 2 and 2 together. And the woman said, let my lord the king now speak. Now I'm in 2 Samuel 14:19. And the king said, is not the hand of Joab with thee in all this? And the woman answered and said, as thy soul liveth, my lord the king, none can turn to the right hand or to the left from aught that my lord the king hath spoken. For thy servant Joab, he bade me, and he put all these words in the mouth of thine handmaid. To fetch about this form of speech, hath thy servant Joab done this thing, and my lord is wise according to the wisdom of an angel of God. to know all things that are in the earth, right? So him being likened to an angel or messenger of God, being able to discern the situation and the situation behind the situation, which is okay. She's giving me this story. She's putting on a good show, but the story seems awfully familiar to a situation that I'm in myself. You put two and two together and realize, okay, this is Joab doing this to speak to me concerning Absalom and him being away for all this time. It says in 21, and the king said unto Joab, behold, now I have done this thing. Go therefore, bring the young man Absalom again. And Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself and thanked the king. And Joab said, today thy servant knoweth that I have found grace in thy sight, O Lord, my Lord, O king, and that the king hath fulfilled the request of his servant. So Joab arose and went to Jeshurun and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. So after all this time that had gone by, and him yearning to see his son Absalom, he finally brought him back after Joab kind of gave him this scenario, this situation with this wise woman of Tekoa to now bring him back under conditions, though, as we're going to see. And the king said, let him turn to his own house, let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. It says, but in all Israel there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him, right? So now going into Absalom and his person, he took after his father in this regard as far as him being very beautiful to look upon, right? Being a very attractive, handsome man, right? That's what it's talking about when it says here. And it also says in verse 26, and when he polled his head, for it was at every year's end that he had polled it because the hair was heavy on him. So he had really heavy, thick hairs. He had like a big, heavy fro or bush on his hair, right? As far as his hair growing out. Doesn't really say how he may have styled his hair, right? But when he before he cut it, obviously he would probably take out the braids or the locks if he had them. Because the hair was heavy on him, therefore he polled it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. So yeah, so he grew very thick, heavy hair, right? It says, and unto Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. So he married, had it says 3 sons here, at least at this point, and it says, and he had a daughter who he named Tamar, obviously after his sister, right? Tamar. She was a woman of a fair countenance. So his daughter was beautiful as well, as was his sister, as was he. It says in 28, so Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem and saw not the king's face. He was there, but they just didn't see each other. It says, therefore Absalom sent for Joab to have sent him to the king, but he would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, he would not come. Therefore he said to his servants, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he hath barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Jeez. So it's kind of like, we tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, excuse me. Or you say, excuse me. The person just doesn't acknowledge you or come to visit. Okay, now I got to do something a little more extreme to get your attention. There's also laws to deal with this too, right? This also deals with another law when it comes to laws of restitution. When you cause property damage to your brother's property. It says, wherefore hath thy servant set my skip the verse 31. Then Joab arose and came to Absalom unto his house and said unto him, wherefore hath thy servant set my field on fire? And Absalom answered Joab, behold, I sent unto thee, saying, come hither, that I may send thee to the king, to say, wherefore am I come to Jeshurun? It had been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore let me see the king's face. And if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. Right? So it's like, okay, I've been away for all this time. Now I'm back all this time. I haven't seen the king, right? I want to see my dad's face. I want to talk to him. I know you talk to him. Let me talk to you to go talk to him, right? It would be better off I just stayed in Jeshurun all this time, right? Why bring me back if I can't even, talk to him and tell him what's the situation? Even if it means that I'd be put to death for killing Abnon, let it be. Let me at least see my father, right? So Joab came to the king and told him, and when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom, right? So once again, rough situation. Comforted that he killed his other son, Amnon, as tough as that may have been to lose his son, Amnon, but after hearing what he did, knowing that the judgment must happen. So, you know, this just being an excellent scenario just to really consider when we talk about respect of persons, because you read it in the law, you say, yes, there should not be any respect of persons in judgment, right? But when it comes to your own blood, when it comes to your own family, right? What do? Right? Do you still take that staunch approach, right? You know what the law says, but sometimes it's easier said than done, especially when you're placed in a situation when it's your own family, right? Be it father or mother, brother, sister, son or daughter, cousins even, right? When they've done wrong and they have to answer for the wrong that they've done. And wanting to preserve all life, right? Wanting to show mercy. So it's easy to kind of wave a finger at others, but when you're in a situation yourself, what will you do? That's the question. But as far as the laws we're talking about, respect of persons, has kind of been a theme of these last couple of chapters. And it'll come up again as we read on. But first, let me get the one that deals with setting a field on fire, since it's somewhat referred to indirectly. You can link this with verse 30. So this is Exodus. Exodus chapter 22. Exodus chapter 22, once again. This goes into not so much of being intentionally, but even if intentional or no, right? This was supposed to happen, right? Exodus chapter 22 and verse 6. So this is going into, we said this chapter in particular talks about laws of restitution, especially when it comes to proprietary restitution. Proprietary is pertaining to possessions, things that you have, right? Be it your land, your cattle, right? Your crops, your house, your clothing, right? Whatever other possessions you may have. So it says in Exodus 22 and verse 6, it reads, if fire break out and catch in thorns, so that the stacks of corn or the standing corn or the field be consumed therewith, he that kindleth the fire shall surely make restitution. Right? So between neighbors, you want to make sure that you just don't have torches, just lying about. If you light a fire, you want to make sure it's propped up properly. And if you want to put out a light, you want to make sure you put it out, especially if it gets to a certain time of night and you're not there anymore. There's no need to leave lights on. Just like in the modern time, you don't leave lights on if you're not in the room, right? You don't want to, extend your light bill. You want to be extra mindful when it comes to, leaving torches on fire or anything that will cause a fire. You don't want that to cause damage to your neighbor's property, let alone your property. And you'll be on the hook if that does happen. But as far as respect of persons in judgment, Deuteronomy chapter 1. This is a good one we can go to. Deuteronomy chapter 1. in verse 17. Deuteronomy chapter 1 and verse 17. So yeah, presumptuous fire or accidental fire, right? Arson in the scriptures. Deuteronomy chapter 1 and verse 17 on respect of persons, though, it says, "You shall not respect persons in judgment, but ye shall hear the small as well as the great. You should not be afraid of the face of man, for the judgment is powers or God's. And the cause that is too hard for you, bring it unto me, and I will hear it." Right? It says, "You should not respect persons in judgment." So whether it be small or great, right? In other words, it could be a common folk, common person, or it could be someone who's high up in authority. Like in this case, we're talking about a king, right? We're supposed to hear the matter. And there's other laws that go into not accepting gifts or bribes. I always quote this law as well as the law about accepting gifts, and how you can see that here in our captivity under our brother Esau, the wicked, at every level, whether you're talking municipal, state, or federal level, you see these laws, just these two among others, but these two especially being broken all the time, right? Where the judges show favor to the defendant if it's someone that they know or someone that they're close to, or someone that it's a what they call a fictitious person, like a company. It's worth a lot of money, right? They'll show a favor to a person like that because they'll pad the pockets of the judge, so to speak, and give them a bribe and go, "Hey, here's a little money. I'll make sure to give you that money for that next time you run for judge. I'll make sure to give you that money so you can look the other way, right? If you do that, I'll make sure that I fund your campaign to become judge for the next term, right?" So they'll do that. People that are famous or people that have money, right? They'll do that for judges, for lawyers, so that things can go in their way, go in their favor. But the Most High said, when it comes to Israel ruling, we shouldn't do this, right?
Hey,
We
Jay,
shouldn't show favorites. We shouldn't show
how about we
favoritism.
go there and get that stuff to go? Can we do that?
Whoever's on a teleconference, if you can just mute your line, Biblical Shot. Just do a star 6. I think we're hearing some of your background noise. Okay, I'm not sure if that person can hear me, so I just muted them. All right, so that's Deuteronomy 1 and 17 about respecting of persons. But it's going to get definitely a lot more interesting if it hasn't already, as we see these horrible events that have taken place, within Israel, especially within the royal family, right? Where you got one son of the king forcing himself on a daughter of the king, and her brother rising up to kill that brother that forced himself on his sister. So, we got some serious family drama here. But like I said, it's going to get a little more, not a little more, a lot more hairy as we go on and read on in 2 Samuel 15. That's why I said earlier, the good, the bad, the ugly, it's all there when it comes to Israel, right? For the good that we did, and even for the bad that we did. Unlike other nations that oftentimes will doctor their history, try to sugarcoat it. Whereas for us, we can apply Romans 15 and 4 and say, let's learn from the good that our forefathers and foremothers did. Let's also learn from the mistakes that our forefathers and foremothers did. And we can definitely do that as you read through, as we had done already, as you read through the Samuels, as you go through the Samuels, get towards the kings as well. Because, at least during David's reign, we had more good than bad going on. But going forward after Solomon and towards the end of Solomon's reign and going after that, we're going to see things get a lot more interesting for the kings that come after them, right? And even interesting while they reign too. You could add this to Deuteronomy 1 and 17 before we close out. Add Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 15 as well. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 15 to go with Deuteronomy chapter 1 and verse 17. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 15, it reads, "You shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Thou shalt not respect the person of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. But in righteousness thou shalt judge thy neighbor." Right? It's just another law to meditate on and to consider based on what we read today. And it seemed like go by a lot quicker than I thought. But yeah, that was 13 and 14 of 2 Samuel. But we'll make an end here. And know for next week, we're going to be reading 2 Thessalonians chapters 2 and 3. Once again, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and 3 for next week. Also keep in mind, we're in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or the Chag HaMatzawath right now, the fifth day in particular. So even though it's a Sabbath and we want to keep it holy, we can cook. Just remember we can cook, but just make sure whatever we cook or prepare with heat, it just doesn't have any leaven or leavening in it, as we should have removed all leaven or yeast from our households. And we talked about it before, but just remember too, as you saw the text I set out a couple days ago about us having the closing service on Sunday night. While we have the closing service Sunday night, remember that from Sunday sundown to Monday sundown is the final day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or the Chag HaMatzawath. So the feast officially doesn't end until Monday sundown. Just figured I'd mention it in case we forgot. Monday sundown is when the feast officially ends, even though we come together on the first and the last day. Just like we came together Monday sundown, right, the past, but we know that the Sabbath didn't end until Tuesday sundown. And this last Sabbath is going to be for the closing of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is going to be Sunday sundown to Monday sundown. But we're going to have a feast and come together Sunday sundown. Just remember that. So 2 Thessalonians 2 and 3 for next Sabbath service. Just remember that in your notes. And continue to enjoy the feast week. And as we continue to talk about it, as was discussed in the class, like it tells in Romans 12 and 21, be not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. Use this time now that we're in to talk about the Feast of Unleavened Bread with family and friends that are talking about, Good Friday supposedly just happened, as well as, Easter Sunday, right? To where we already have a holy day that we can keep to counteract, right? Have to happen at the same time, right? Which leaves us that know the truth about Christ, no excuse to even try to keep this, because we know we should be keeping the Feast of Unleavened Bread and getting it for the close day, opposed to celebrating the resurrection of Christ. Now, we celebrate the resurrection of Christ knowing the truth, but it's not some day that Christ said to keep. We don't read that anywhere in the scriptures. Anytime we do have that in the scriptures, whether it be the 6 books or the Apocrypha, it'll be mentioned there, and it will be specific. They'll say, keep this day holy and keep it throughout your generations. Christ would have told us to do that after he abide with the disciples 40 days and nights. But he never said do that. But he did say to acknowledge his resurrection. But as far as the day when it happened, he never said to do that. So this custom of keeping this Easter Sunday is something that's of man, and it's not holy. But it goes back before the Son of God, and it deals with idolatry that mostly Hamites practiced as it pertains to deifying the sun, other practices like that, and idols that pertain to the sun. Hence the sunrise service, and they'll make you think that, oh, you're going to the church Just like the women went to the cave to see the sepulchre to see if his body was still there. But they're really doing it to adore the sun during the time shortly after the vernal equinox, which is the changing of the seasons, the springtime. So it's very, very carefully crafted to make us think it comes from the scriptures, but the custom actually doesn't. So let's do what Christ actually did, not what people say that Christ told us to do, but what the scriptures actually say. We're just to remember his resurrection, yes, but to keep the Passover holy as he did and as the disciples did that came after. Let me just get this one other verse, and I've been saying that's the last verse. Let me get this verse too. This is Acts. Acts chapter 20. Acts chapter 20 and verse 6. Just to read, I just want to read this as an example to show we kept the high holy days while teaching Christ, even after Christ died and rose from the grave. So this is Acts chapter 20 and verse 6. It says, "And we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came unto them to Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days." Right? So in this scenario, they weren't able to go back to Jerusalem, whereas you read about Paul and the other apostles while doing the work, they would travel back to Jerusalem when they could. That's how Acts actually starts, right? But you have many Jews going to keep the day of Pentecost, another high holy that comes in the summertime and comes from everywhere, out of every nation under heaven. So showing you that what we still keep the high holy days while following and teaching Christ. So how do the Christians today miss that? But we see them even taking time to keep the days of unleavened bread, even though they were doing their travels and doing the work. They made sure to do their travels after the unleavened bread feast was finished. So it's something that we take with us, no matter where we are in the world. We want to make sure we're keeping this, right? Whether we're in the Holy Land like we were before, whether we've been scattered like we were at this time, and like how we definitely are now, we still want to keep the feast of unleavened bread. And once again, you can use this verse, Acts 26, as just as one example to show that we still kept the holy days, even while teaching Christ. So, because sometimes you'll hear so-called Christians, they'll say, "Oh well, we don't keep the yeah, they kept the Last Supper, they kept the feast of unleavened bread, but after Christ died, it was all nailed on the cross with him." So how do you explain this? How do you explain the day of Pentecost, Acts chapter 2? How do you explain them keeping the Day of Atonement, other things you read about in Acts of the Apostles? How do you explain them keeping other holy days still while teaching Christ and promoting Christ and building up the different churches? So I won't look at what people say. I'll look at what people do, and namely the Acts of the Apostles. I'll look at what they did, and I'll use this as my model for following Christ. Hopefully you will too. So Sharkhag Matazawath once again, Yawam Ha, which just means happy feast of unleavened bread, day 5, Wa Ashar Shabbat, and with that we'll do the closing prayers. Barakate Hawa by Shemi Hawashai, Asharana Nana Paria Gapen, Tuara Aman. Lai Hawa by Shemi Hawashai, Af Yasha Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Amadwa, Panyawai Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh Basham, Yahweh Shai, Babakushai, Shemai, Lanawib, Aithai, Yam Yan, Aithai, Shalak, Mike Allah, Walla Allahayim, Tazwadakim, La Shema Aya, Barak, Rapha, Magan, Wakaziak, Banye, Yash Allah, Washalak, Lanawa, Rabiim, Kakamad, Rabiim, Da'ath, Rabiim, Bayanad, Rabiim, Sabalanwa, Rabiim, Mamawan, Rabiim, Aqua, Rabiim, Mahabiim, Rabiim, Haganad, Rakanay, Wasalak, Kau, Katayamnawa, La Akim, Wa Akua, Wayash Allah, Thamyad, Waiwalam, Basham, Yahushay, the water, Aman. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, please listen to us now, right now. Send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. And send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you, so be it. Four Corners Prayer. Yahweh Basham, Yahweh Shai, Barak Nawe, Wayash Ale, Wabat Yasapariam, Shema, Yashirale, Yahweh, Elohai Nawe, Yahweh, Achai. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. So with that, we'll say once again, Ashar Shabbat, wa Ashar Chag Hamatazawath.
Ashar Shabbat.
Shalom, Yasharallah.
Shalom.
Shalom, Shalom.
Shalom, Akwav.
Shalom, Akbar.